Hey there, traveling has always been more than just moving from one place to another. It's about dreaming of discovering the unknown, pushing your own limits, and proving that people can do things that seem totally impossible at first glance. Some people choose classic city sightseeing, admiring old buildings and trying local foods. Others look for challenges. They climb the world's highest mountains, sail across oceans, or trek through deserts. But then there are those who decided to go even further. They made history with travel records that sound like they're from an adventure movie. Today, I'm going to tell you about the most unbelievable travel records in the world, about people who went on solo trips around the globe, broke speed records for traveling, and ended up in places most of us will never reach. These stories aren't just surprising, they also inspire us and show that limits mostly exist in our minds. Let's go. Let's start with a record that can spark the imagination of any travel fan: visiting the most countries in the world. For most of us, even visiting a dozen countries is a huge achievement. But some people have set a goal to see the whole world. One of the most famous travelers in this group is Cassie De Pecol from the United States. At just 27 years old, she became the first woman to visit all 196 countries recognized by the UN. It took her less than a year and a half. This wasn't just regular tourism. Cassie also ran a project promoting peace and environmental protection, meeting with local communities and leaders. But that's not all. Other travelers have gone even further. Gunnar Garfors from Norway, a businessman and adventure lover, has visited every country in the world, not once, but twice. What's more, he did it while working a full-time job and planning his trips in his free time. This shows that such records aren't just for rich people. It's about determination, planning, and a huge passion. Here's a fun fact that might surprise you. There are special traveler rankings like Nomad Mania or The Best Traveled, where people compete to see who can visit the most places. Because just visiting all countries is only the beginning. Some try to also visit dependent territories, autonomous regions, or even islands that the average tourist would never find on a map. Looking at these records, it's easy to ask, is this still traveling for fun, or is it a race to achieve the impossible? For many of these travelers, it's mostly proof that the world is much more diverse and fascinating than it might seem. And every country, even the smallest one, has its own unique story to tell. Hitchhiking is one of the craziest ways to travel. You never know who will stop where they'll take you, or what stories you'll experience along the way. For many, it's an adventure for a weekend or a vacation. But there are people who have turned hitchhiking into a life's mission and broken records that are hard to imagine. One of the most amazing examples is the story of Canadian Graham Hughes from the UK. He decided to travel around the entire world without using airplanes, only by catching rides traveling by land and sea. For 4 years, he visited all 193 UN member states and did it by hitchhiking, ferries, and local transport. In his journey, the rides from strangers method played a key role. Hughes proved that even such a huge challenge can be achieved through trust in people and a bit of craziness. But that's not the only example. In the Guinness World Records, you'll find journeys where hitchhikers covered tens of thousands of kilometers, from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, from Europe all the way to Asia. The longest routes of this type measure over 70,000 kilometers, which is almost twice around the Earth. An interesting fact is that in the world of hitchhikers, there's something like an unwritten code. Travelers share advice, warnings, and good spots along the route. Some say that hitchhiking isn't just a way to get around, but also the best way to meet people, because during one ride you can hear stories that will never appear in guidebooks. Imagine for a moment what that means: spending hundreds of hours in strangers' cars, eating what the drivers offer, sleeping in random places, and trusting strangers at the end of the world. It's a journey full of risks, but also unforgettable encounters and friendships that often last a lifetime. The longest hitchhiking journeys show that sometimes the biggest records don't require a lot of money or fancy transportation. They require courage, patience, and the ability to say, "I'm getting in, let's see where this takes me." Record-breaking journeys aren't just about how far you go or how many countries you visit, they're also about tackling the extreme places on our planet. And the most amazing of these is reaching the highest and lowest spots on Earth. The highest? That's Mount Everest, of course. It's the top of the world, a huge mountain in the Himalayas, standing over 29,000 feet above sea level. For many people, it's a lifelong dream to go there, where the clouds are below your feet. The first to do it were Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay in 1953. Since then, hundreds, actually thousands of brave people have tried to do the same. But it's still a dangerous trip. Avalanches, altitude sickness, and crazy weather make Everest one of the biggest challenges for people. On the other hand, we have the lowest place, the Dead Sea. Its surface is about 1,400 feet below sea level. This place is just as amazing as the top of Everest, but in a totally different way. The water is so salty that you can't sink. You float like a cork on top, but it's also one of the fastest shrinking bodies of water in the world, which makes it even more special. The most incredible travel records connect these two worlds. There are people who have climbed Everest and then, within a few days, dipped into the Dead Sea, breaking the record for going from the highest to the lowest point on the planet. Imagine the difference. One day, you're fighting for breath on top of the world, the next you're floating in the calm waters of the saltiest lake on Earth. It's interesting that there are also travelers who take on other extremes, like divers who go to the deepest parts of the oceans, or climbers who try to conquer the 7 highest peaks on each continent, known as the 7 summits. All of this is to show that people have no limits, neither up nor down. When we think about traveling around the world, we imagine something long, peaceful, full of adventures and discoveries. But there are some who turn it into a race against time, a chase for a speed record. One of the most famous travelers who took on this challenge was Andrew Fisher from Great Britain. In 2018, he managed to break the Guinness World Record for the fastest trip around the world, using passenger planes. Fisher started in New York and then traveled across the entire planet, visiting 4 main airline hubs along the way. The whole trip took him 72 hours and 45 minutes. That's less than 3 days to go around the globe. But that's not the only way these kinds of records are set. There are also travelers who decide to take on the challenge of around the world without a plane. Here, the story of Phileas Fogg from Jules Verne's novel comes to mind. In the 19th century, he came up with this idea, a trip around the world in 80 days. That was a made-up story, but for many, it became an inspiration for real journeys. In the real world, these records are even more amazing. The British traveler Mark Beaumont in 2017 did something unbelievable. He rode around the entire world on a bicycle. He covered a distance of over 40,000 kilometers and did it in just 78 days, 14 hours, and 40 minutes. That means he rode an average of about 500 kilometers every single day. Another interesting record is the one for sailing around the world. The French sailor Francis Joyon in 2017 sailed around the Earth in 40 days, 23 hours, 30 minutes, and 30 seconds. Alone, fighting storms and the harsh ocean, he broke a record that once seemed impossible to beat. The most interesting thing about these stories is that each record breaker chose a different path and a different way to travel, plane, bike, sailboat, but the goal was the same, to go around the world faster than anyone before. It's proof that humans have always had a need to compete, but also a desire to see where the limits of human endurance and technology lie. And even though most of us will never take on such a challenge, just knowing that there are people who can go around the planet in less than 3 days makes a trip to the next town seem, well, pretty ordinary. Sea voyages have always had a touch of romance and mystery. Back in the day, a ship cruise was the only way to see faraway continents. Today, it's all about luxury and calmly exploring the world. But some cruises break all records, turning a trip into the adventure of a lifetime. The longest passenger ship cruise ever was organized in 2019 by Viking Cruises. It lasted exactly 350 days. That's almost a whole year. The Viking Sun ship set sail from London and during this trip visited almost 60 countries and over 120 ports on 6 continents. This wasn't just any trip, it was a true slow-paced journey around the world. Passengers got to experience something most of us only dream about, seeing the Great Wall of China, sailing through the Panama Canal, standing at the foot of the Sydney Opera House, and even visiting exotic Pacific islands. Imagine daily life on such a cruise. It's not just sightseeing but living in a floating city. On board there were restaurants, theaters, pools, spas and libraries. Many passengers said they felt like they'd moved into a parallel reality for a year, where every day brought a new view, a new land and a new culture. What's interesting is that such a cruise cost a fortune, and yet there was no shortage of people wanting to go. This record proves that it's not always about speed and competition. Sometimes, slowly discovering the world, day by day, port by port, becomes the most amazing experience you can imagine. For most of us, flying on a plane is something special, a vacation, a business trip, a visit to an exotic place. But there are people who turn flying into a way of life and break records doing it. One of the most unbelievable achievements in this category is the record set by Tom Stuker, a businessman from the United States. In 1 year, he took over 1,500 flights, spending almost 400 days in the air. How is that possible, since a year only has 365 days? Well, Stuker not only flew every day, but he repeatedly crossed different time zones and often returned to his starting point on the same day. It's worth adding that this travel marathoner has a special United Airlines pass, which lets him fly without limits. For him, the plane became more than just a way to get around. It's his office, restaurant, and hotel all rolled into one. Imagine that kind of daily life. You wake up in New York, have lunch over the Atlantic, and go to sleep in Tokyo in the evening. The next day you start in Paris and end up in Dubai. Sounds like science fiction, but for him, it was real life. An interesting fact is that Tom Stuker has flown over 50 million kilometers in his life. That's like circling the earth over 1,200 times. The airlines treat him almost like family. He has his favorite seats on planes, and he even knows some of the crew members personally, whom he's met many times during his travels. This record shows how far a person can go in the pursuit of travel and experience. For some, flying means stress and waiting in lines at the airport. For others, like Tom, it's an everyday thing, a lifestyle and a passion that turned into a record the whole world is talking about. There are over 1,300 UNESCO World Heritage Sites around the world, from ancient ruins in Peru to medieval European cities to the wild nature of Africa. Each of these places has its own special value and is a piece of our civilization's history. But there are people who decided to visit all of them. One of the most famous travelers is Jarmo Lehtinen from Finland, who for years carefully kept track of his visits to each site. He spent thousands of hours on planes, hundreds of days on trains, and countless nights in tents to reach even the most far-off corners of the world. Imagine this. You're walking on the Great Wall of China, and a week later you're standing in front of the amazing Victoria Falls. One moment you're looking at old temples in Cambodia, and the next you're deep in the Amazon jungle. It's a journey through all times and places. The biggest challenge with this record isn't even the number of places, but how hard they are to get to. Some places are super isolated, like islands on the UNESCO list, where you can only get there by special boat trips. Others are in countries dealing with conflicts, where visiting takes a lot of bravery and determination. What's interesting is that there's a group of travelers who compete to see who can visit the most UNESCO sites. Everyone puts their achievements into special online records and treats it like a game where the goal is to experience all the different cultures and natural beauty of the world. This record shows something amazing, that travel isn't just about thrills or numbers, but also a deep connection with history and what humanity has left behind. Someone who visits all UNESCO sites will literally see the whole world, its beauty, but also how delicate it is and why we need to protect it. Travel is more than just getting from point A to point B. It's about dreams that push people to cross borders, literally and figuratively. The records I talked about today show not only human endurance and passion, but also the amazing diversity of the world. From travelers who visited all countries, to those who hitchhiked halfway around the globe, to people who made history by visiting every UNESCO site, it all proves that limits mostly exist in our minds. Maybe not all of us will break a record, but everyone can find their own special journey. Because sometimes, one trip is enough to change your whole life. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Take care. Bye for now.